Hello there. Welcome to Painting with Shawna's on Thursdays. I'm so glad that you joined me. Working on a delphinium still, or I'm working, I guess it's a royal we. On the delphinium, I've taken it a lot further, even from the picture that I posted on Facebook, so I think you'll be pleased with where we're at. And if you are on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you're on Facebook, follow and like my page. And I have a weekly newsletter that goes with this that has really different content than you would see normally. Last week I was in Alberta, and we went to the interactive Van Gogh show with our grandson and our son and daughter-in-law. And so there are pictures actually with my grandson doing a photo shoot on this week's newsletter. So if you want different kind of content that you're going to see anyplace else, just join on to my newsletter, and you can do that by going to dancingravenstudio.ca. It'll be linked below at the end. I'll go up and make sure that that's linked below. I have a show coming up on October 29th as the opening. It's called Changing Seasons. Now COVID is moving in ways that are pretty not exciting. So it may be either in person or it may be live streamed, and the artwork will go up on my website and will be for sale there, depending on how we're doing with the Delta variant. It's arrived in Yellowknife and it's taking off across the north. So, you know, it's one of those things. I am ready to go paint. So let's just get on to what we are here for. Okay, switch this over a little bit more. There we go. Fill the screen in. So you can see how far I've gotten. Now this is long ways. It's normally top to the painting is actually this way. So I want to remind you the colors that we've been working with. So let's just put a little paper in to protect against. Maybe a bigger piece of paper. Yeah, there we are. There's a bigger piece of paper. I have all these ugly pieces of paper that are great for this. Okay, so we are working with cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, and in between is where the pure blue is. And I'm adding orange to darken it, and neutral tint. I have phthalo green and neutral tint combination that I'm using when I combine the quin magenta and the ultramarine, the dioxazine purple. Move that down. Here I'm just... So if you're here and watching as I'm going live, say hello. It's always nice to see who's here and to talk to you. So that's the colors that I'm still working with to build this up. Now I've got most of the green where I want it to be. I've got a couple little pieces of green. So let's see if that's in our range, if you can see it, or if I have to move it over. I think I'm going to move it over just a little bit. So yeah, move it over. There's a delay, so I can't see until you guys can see. Yeah, there we go. Moving it over, maybe even a little bit more. There we go. Oops. I'm trying to get to that little last bit of green there. I think I'm here. So right here is that last little bit of green. So I'm going to take some of the New Gamboge yellow. Actually, I can put that up here beside. Let's do that. We'll just cover the rest of the painting up. And we'll put this up beside, and so you can see the New Gamboge yellow mixed in with, now this green has been modified. I have taken a very bright green. Let's get some water on here and see if we can get things moving a little bit better without too much water. I've taken some burnt umber into that very bright green to bring that chroma down. I've brought some neutral tint in as well, and then I add that into the yellow so that it's a greeny yellow. And then I need something for my hands. So this is a little area, and this is basically what I've done for all the little areas, is I've filled them in. Fill this one into here. They're pretty dark. None of these are in the light. They're all in behind petals, so they're pretty dark. So I'm going to bring in some of the dark. I don't want too much on my brush, so I'm going to clean my brush off, dry it, and then only take a small amount of the dark paint, and I'm going to just tickle it in. So tickling it in means that I'm going to let the water the paint that's already on there just take some of the paint off the brush. I'm not hardly touching the paper, because I'm just letting it pull off a little bit of the excess moisture on my brush, which then gives you sort of a nicer blend out. Dot, 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 dot. And then I'm going to come and just take a dry, thirsty brush and touch the edge so that I can sort of give that illusion of sunlight. I'll let that dry. Now I was using Hunter's Green, Burnt Umber, Neutral Tint, and New Gamboge in my greens. And that's always my greens. I don't seem to use many other greens in there. Okay, so let's move this back so it's more even in here. And I thought I would work in this flower here because it is, okay, now I need my image. I have hardly started to work on here, and what I'm doing is I'm setting the stage. So in this flower over here, I've done most of the textures in it. I don't think it's finished yet, but I won't really know for a little bit. I want to get this one here done. And I found it really fascinating, the different textures that are on these petals. Okay, so let's start with this one here. And I can see it's got a bit of that sort of low chroma purple. And we're going to come right down all the way to about here. And then I'm going to clean my brush, dry it off, and just with the wetness of the brush, move that little bit of paint around to make the shape that I'm seeing here. So yeah, just soften that edge. It has one sort of hard edge, and then it has the softer edge that's right here and is that shape. Okay, so now we'll take a little bit of this same, I can see it's more blue actually, so I'm going to grab a little bit of blue that's there, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to pull that paint out and leaving it very pale because I can see that it's quite pale. And I'm going to just Okay, work away here. I have a cast shadow here, so let's play with that and get that in position. It always helps to see where you're, and you notice I don't do them very dark. My cast shadows are not very dark. They're built up layer after layer so that I can get to the actual color I want it to be and the value I want it to be. And I'm going to show you how I check my values. Come down here in just a few minutes. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit of this purple because I can see that there's a float of purple in here. And it's coming around. I probably started too high. Oh well, there you go. We'll just bring it down. It's a flower after all. Bring it down and bring it here. It is a flower petal. So if perfection is your issue, then, you know, sometimes you just make a mistake and you just go with it and think that it's a petal. Okay, we'll let that dry. I think that's actually one whole petal. I thought it was two, but when I look at it close by, no, actually it is two petals. It's two different flowers. Okay, and a little bit more of that grayed out purple. More towards the quin magenta. I'm going to test it out here. I've got a little strip that I've been working on. Let's not work on that strip. Little strip that I've been working on so that I can make sure I have consistency happening and the colors I want are happening the way I want them to. So there's a little pull in here. Okay, all this builds up to darker and darker colors as we move along, but it's so much easier if you start light with watercolor and build up to where you want it to go, because it's easier to pull it back and say, oh, I don't like that shape, and just touch it back than to get really dark paint on and try to move it. It's just not easy at all to do. Sorry, I was a little late today. Things happen, and, you know, plans of mice and women. Okay, so now let's do this one here. I can see that it comes down here. So I'm just setting the stage here. I'm slowly building up the shapes that I'm seeing in here. Dry my brush off. Clean it out, soften this edge. Okay, where did I go? There I am. Okay, soften this edge and pull up some of that pinker color, the quin magenta, just a little bit into here. And then move it around gently. There we go. To where I want it to be. I'll bring a little bit of that blue in here and darken it so that it meets up with that magenta. Let's get my brush that's got more gumption to it. Just a bigger version of the same brush. Sometimes, okay, and then I can, this brush will push things around more. It's been a well-loved brush, and so there's a sense of it can do the work I need it to do because yeah, just my favorite size brush. Sadly, the manufacturers have stopped making this particular brush, and I have yet to make the time to go and do a search for other brushes. I will do that after my show. I will go and look for different watercolor brushes. So I get too much paint, I'm just going to pull it off with a dry brush. Okay, I stand back. I'm always moving back and forth, because it helps me to see a little further away. Well, why don't we go up to this one? And again, going back to that smaller brush. And I'm looking at where these lines sort of connect and trying to keep them sort of interesting looking without a little bit of purple in there. And I want to pull some of that paint out because, again, I don't want it too dark. I can always add another layer, but if it gets too dark, then it's in the way and it looks weird. Okay, let's go to the next line. Okay. Looking back and forth at the shape. If you could see my head is moving back and forth as I'm trying to follow this shape, and I'm trying to, yes. Okay. That's interesting. There's a little bit of purple on the edge here. And purple on this edge here. I'm going to take some of that Quin, more pinky purple, as I move up, because it's like it's coming off of the petal from underneath. I'm going to soften the edges here. I don't want them to be too hard. Okay. There is a shape down here. There's a line that comes just on the tip here. Oh, no, there's one here. Huh, interesting. And I really want it pale, so I'm going to put lots of water. That's the nice part about watercolor is you just put lots of water and it just softens that color just perfectly. And you've got what you want without too much paint in it. Okay, and then we're going to come in to the next one here. I see one that comes down here, and if I do it pale, I mean, I've said this many times, you can always come back and darken things, but you can get your space and your shapes in place and be really happy with them. Okay, that pale. There's lots more work to be done in here. I have not done any of the value checks that I'm going to show you here in a bit. I want that to be super soft. Okay. I have textures even in the cast shadow. There's variation happening. So let's get that in place. We're going to go here, and then we're going to come down, and then we're going to thin out the paint and pull it into the shape that we're looking for. Put a little bit more paint in there. Oh, I see it's lots more magenta in there. Just a touch of that very pinky purple to float and create variation. So one side is hard, so I want to leave that side hard, but this side is soft. So I'm just touching the edge of my brush to soften that edge. Then we're going to come over here. And I see that there's another shape here that comes here and goes down. And it has fairly sharp edges, but I'm just going to touch the edge just to soften them a bit. There. And all of these little shapes I'll be able to see as I go to put the next layer on the cast shadow, the cast shadow from the other petals. So I clean my brush off, dry it off. I always got a piece of blue paper towel in my hand because you need to be able to touch the excess water off, even though I've touched it to way down there by my palette. I have a pile of paper towel. Okay. Shut off the camera, turn it back on. Okay, so let's take, it's interesting that in the it's quite blue, there's this lovely purple happening in this blue shadow, cast shadow, which is quite fascinating. I'll just soften the edges so that it stays nice and tidy. Now there is a little bit of blue on beyond here, so I'm going to continue on with this line in a blue. Okay, there's more shapes in here, so let's keep going, building the shapes on in this space. So there's this interesting sort of shape here that is dark at the top and lighter at the bottom. So to make it lighter at the bottom, I clean off my brush, I pull just the paint that's on there. And that's good. And it softens that and lightens it, but it leaves it there. I want to soften the edges a little bit by just touching the edge with a fairly dry, damp brush. It's not got too much water on it. Watercolor is both a, it has this wonderful, wonderful ability to do interesting shapes and layers, but if you get too much water on, or if you don't have enough water, or you have, water is both your friend and your enemy. A careful balance. And as you practice, when I first started painting watercolor, I was only painting sort of once a month because I was actually a quilter and I was making art pieces for quilting. And so when you paint only once a month, what ends up happening is you keep making the same mistake over and over. And I kept getting super hard edges, and I kept having problems with what I was working on. But when I decided to take this on full time and paint full time, and I dedicated hours a day to it, it wasn't long before I understood how much water to put onto my brush and how much water to put on the paper, and it becomes just a second nature kind of action. But it's like painting with anything. Once you get comfortable with it, it's amazing how you don't have to think about it. You just make it happen. Okay. So I keep looking back and forth, thinking about the shapes here. Oops, I need to get more water on my palette. I use a squirt bottle. This is a squirt bottle that I use to put water on so I can control it and I can have as much as I need but not too much. And it, the joy of watercolor is the paint reacts to that water in great ways. Okay. So I'm coming in here and I'm seeing sort of this rounded shape here that will go to being more dark blue in just a bit. And I'm going to pull out a little bit this way and pull out. Let's go to that darker blue. A little bit more blue. I need more chroma in it. I got it too grayed out. Test it out here. Make sure that's what I'm looking for. And pull it, pull it, pull it, pull it, pull it. So that I can pull these colors together. So if I move quickly, as you have to with watercolor, now if you live in a place that's got way more moisture in the air, I think you get a little bit more playtime with it. And I do know some watercolor artists who will have a humidifier in their room to give them that more time. I've just learned how to work with what I have here, and I'm all right with that. Pull it, pull it, pull it. So this area is the dark crater of, it's the darkest point actually in this whole flower. If you look at this whole flower, the darkest point is there and then in here. So I want to make sure that that's my darkest place, but in comparison to everything else, it looks like it is now. Now, if I wanted to, I'm not quite ready for that one. Here, let's figure out the value on this. So to figure out the value of what I need my painting to get to, I have these little squares that are just cut from presentation folders that you get at Staples or at whatever store is near you. And I use a value strip. Now the value strip is always numbered for me. I'll do this one here. 9 with 0, 10 being white, and 1 being just before black. 0 would be black, because in my head, black is like nothing and white is like everything. So that's why I've numbered the way I've done. Other people do it the other way around. It makes no difference. It just is what people do. So I will put my opening right over top of the petal here, and then I'm going to put it over here, and immediately I can see my value is nowhere near, but now I'm going to test and figure out what value I'm looking for. So I think I'm kind of looking between 6 and 7. If I get to 6, I'm going to be happy with that. So let's put the 6 underneath and then put it against, and you can see the 6 is the same value as this background is. So that's interesting. And you can see that this little bit of color there is way too light. So let's darken that up and get it to where I want, closer to where. Now it won't be right away to where I want it to be because I do it in layers. I'd rather do 3 or 4 or 5 layers to get where I want to be than to rush it and then have it too dark and it wouldn't work out and wouldn't match with what I'm trying to accomplish. So I'm going to wet the area. So I'm going to grab another brush. It's not a big area, but it's big enough that if I just give it a damp wash and move that water around a bit. Okay. And then I'm going to, I think I'm going to start with the blues. And then I'll float in that purple right at the end. So it's really interesting because I think what I'm seeing in behind is a petal that's in behind. So that's kind of fascinating. So I'm taking the grayed out blue now and adding it on here and blending it in and pulling just with the paint that's on my brush and the water that's on the, pulling that right to the edge. And now I'm going to bring in, nice and careful, moving slowly. I have my hand anchored. I'm going to bring in that sort of darky purple that's floating on the edge. I can see it's sort of floating here and in sort of a rounded shape. Okay. Let that dry just as it is. I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to let it dry. It's dark now, but it will dry lighter. That's what watercolor does. So let's see what this value would be. I can put it over top and I can see it's a 6 again. Yeah. Okay, and this one, oh, it's closer to a 6. It's like a 7. So we're getting closer on this one here. So probably only another layer and we will get to where we want it to be. So let's take some of that blue and a little extra of the different blues here that I have in front of me. I need my list. Cobalt blue, a little bit extra of it. A little less. Okay, let's fill in that area first. Now, because it's very dry here, I can come and work over these shapes already because I put very little paint on. And I'm just not going to really rub hard. I'm just going to place the paint on top. Oh, it's a little bit too dark. I check that out. Yeah, no, I need a little bit more pink in there, a little bit more of the quinacridone purple. That's why having a tester next to you makes it easier. You can see where you want to go and how you want to get that color. And I love that cast shadows have a whole bunch of different things happening in them in a way that's sort of surprising. And you can still see the shapes in underneath as long as I don't move them too much, move the paint too much around them. I would normally wait a little longer, but I forgot about it. And you can see right away that this is no longer as dark because it's been made look lighter because I've got the cast shadow in there. Well, let's go over. Okay, I'll take this out of the way. I need to know what value I want to get to here because that's going to be helpful for me to make my plan about how dark it is. So it's a value 5 here. So it's this value should be in here. So let's start building up towards value 5. Okay, and I'm going to just take this here so I can see it and you can see it. It's kind of a purpley blue. So I'm going to take some purples and some blues and put them together and see if that's what I'm seeing. A little bit more purple, a little bit more blue. Yeah, that's close. A little bit more purple in there. Okay. So let's do this shape here. We're just going to put it in place. Now again, I don't want to do too dark. I've kind of got it in place, but what I want to do is make sure that I have room to move. If I do too much too fast, that could impact my how I can move through it and beyond it. Okay, and then there's this shape that comes. Interesting. I don't want to leave it too long or else I'll get these hard edges here. So let's get some of that purple in there and move it back. A little bit more actual purple. Get it in there and build up the shape as I'm working away here. Rounding that. Oh, I can see there's a bit of that, more of the quinacridone magenta floating in here. I think this is the part that I just feel like is magical, is working on watercolor, because you can float the colors one to another and they just will stay separate but be blended, and that is fabulous. So I'm going to come and soften this edge now all the way along, and then I will come back and figure out where I want to go from here. There are times, like when I'm doing this, that I actually, what I'm doing is I'm drying my brush off on the thing, and then I'm just taking some water off with my fingers, because I don't want to dry it totally. I just want to get the majority of the water off so I can just soften that edge and make it look better. Oops. Now, I have gone over into what's the light area. Probably would have been wiser to, I don't even know what time it is. There you go. Okay. Pull out, pull out, pull out. Just get that shape. Okay. Still lots more work in that area to do, but I've sort of set it more. It's still not the value that I want it to be. If I want it to be value 5, you can see it's more like a value 7 if you squint your eyes. Maybe a bit of value 6. So between 6 and 7. Okay, so I've got some of the stripes in here. I'm feeling like they're a little hard edged. I must have been not totally paying attention. So all I'm going to do while the paint is dry there is come in with the tip of my brush and just touch the edges to soften them. And it just softens them just enough to be a little less harsh. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I'm happy with that. Just come in, and this brushes that I'm using that no longer can be bought because Laurel Cornell stopped using them, stopped producing them. I find them just perfect. They hold just enough water and they are just scrubby enough. And that scrubbiness is sometimes exactly what you need, is something with a little gumption to it. Where when I use my silver, when I use my black velvet silver ones, they're very soft. They hold lots of water, but they do not do scrubbiness and sort of pulling back nicely. You need something with a little bit more firmness to it. And this golden Taklon is fantastic. So I'm hoping that finding golden Taklon is not going to be that difficult when I get a chance to do that. I have enough brushes right now, so it's not a huge issue. Someday it will be. And then I will be working on that. Let's get these shapes in place. So I got lots of paint there, but I don't really want to have that much paint while I'm working on that shape. I'm just going to pull that paint down into the shape that I want it. Okay, and pull the paint around, and it comes and joins there. Okay. Isn't that lovely? Oh, watercolor, it's so pretty. So I'm going to come in here, and again I have another shape here that comes a little bit beyond. I don't want too much paint, so I'm going to clean my brush off a little bit and just move that paint around till I get it to where I want it to be. It actually could be a little closer even, so let's get a little bit more paint to give me that ability to move closer. Soften the edge, and I'm drying it with the with my blue cloth in my hand. Okay, so I like that. Now let's get a little bit more blue and bring it into where we were. I don't want to do too much into there because it's not fully dry. Okay, so let's leave this to dry, and then we'll come in and we will work on darkening it up. Now, I wasn't paying total attention here, and I've got a very hard edge. So I'm going to take that really battered number 8 brush, and I'm going to see if I can sort of pull it and soften it. I need probably a little bit more water on it than I have. I'm just going to touch the edge, and I'm going to soften it because I don't really, it's not a cast shadow in there, it's like a form shadow. So let's just soften that. And then I can bring in the new shape better once it's dry. It's amazing how much you can fix watercolor. As long as you are patient, it's amazing what you can fix in watercolor. So there's a little bit of the center, it's got a little bit of pink in it, that quinacridone magenta. So I'm going to just take the brush and wiggle it back and forth on it to soften the edge and soften that color. I'm not too worried about that. Okay. Okay. Let's look at this one here. There's all sorts of ruffles on the edge. So I'll need my smaller brush because they're smaller paint things. And it seems more that purpley blue again. Okay, so it's going to come down here and up, and then I'm going to clean my brush, dry it off, and pull that paint into the shape that I'm seeing, which is pull it up here and pull it down. So the harder edge has more paint on it, which is what I'm seeing. Okay, now the point has way too much paint in it, so I'm just going to come while it's still damp. I'm going to bring in my cloth and then reshape it a bit there and lighten it up. And I see that there are ruffles that are blue, which are quite pretty. Just a soft ruffle here. So we'll just put a little bit of blue, wet the brush, and bring it all the way to here. There'll be more ruffles in there. Okay, get that little purpley blue area here. I see that there's a ruffle here. Get that shape on each side and then blend the paint towards each other. Oop, too much water, and you can see that it floods the area when you have too much water. Better to come back and have to add more. That is my motto. Okay, and I see there's some more. There's another one here that goes here. I've got it way too dark now, but I'm not going to worry about that because it's still wet and it gives me the time to come in and play with it. I want to reshape that edge. I'm just going to come and push that paint towards where I want it to be, and then it's fine. Okay, touch the... Ha! Somehow I've missed this whole area, which is quite fascinating. Not sure how I did that, but you know, there you go. So let's just darken that in. It's a little too dark because it's not that dark. Okay. Okay, done. And then after you turn your camera off and on again so that it doesn't shut off on me, ready to get back here and working. Okay. That edge is still pretty hard in there. I'm going to come and just float some paint along the edge of it so that it sort of blends more. Then take my paintbrush and make sure that it's not covering the edge, pushing it forward so that I get that value closer. I can fix that in the next round, but I think I'm done there. Okay, let's get this shape even better. The nice thing about flowers is they are very forgiving. They're a great place to learn how to paint watercolor because flowers are flowers and they're not perfect, and if you're not perfect, it's a fabulous place to just give yourself the understanding and the space to learn and not be super stressed by the fact that you can't get the shapes quite right, or you're struggling with your values, or you're struggling with creating the very careful textures that you're seeing. This is a great place to learn, and then once you've learned, you can expand. And I've done glass and watercolor. I've done quite a few different options in watercolor. I did still lifes. If you go to my website and go under art, I think it says like miscellaneous or something like that, and you can check out the very cute Christmas cards that I've made over the years. I don't do them every year because things happen, and so I'm not always coordinated to get done in time. I did a painting for last year for Christmas, but then I was away and couldn't order them. So this year they'll get ordered. I was like, oh well, there you go. This year they'll get ordered, and I will be happy to send them out to people. I have lots of fun with my still lifes that I do for Christmas cards when I get a chance to. I haven't started thinking about what next year's card is going to be. That will come in time, but right now that's not what I'm planning on. Ooh, I'm seeing a ruffle that has a little bit more of sort of the cobalt blue here. So I'm going to take this area here and I'm going to pull down that blue and lighten it up. It's just a very pale blue, but it's just that hint of interest that will add to it. We're just about done. I was a little late starting, but I think that that's all right. Okay, let's clean up this edge here. I need my scrubbier brush, the one that I know can. Somehow I've got 2 layers of paint happening on here that I wasn't paying attention to from one petal to the next. So I just want to soften that and make that kind of disappear, because of course as you layer you're going to see the layers that are underneath. I use only transparent watercolor for that reason, because I love that. Okay, how about what's happening in here? Let's play with that value checker again. So I'm going to put that value there and this value checker over here. And I can see, just visually, I can see that this is still too light. So what I'm going to do is put this underneath and see that it's a value 4. And if I put a value 4 underneath this, it is nowhere near a value 4, the background. It's kind of a value 6. Okay, so let's get this darkened up so that it is pushed back more. And when you push it back, what ends up happening is you also push all of the light areas forward. So I can see that it has a lot of quin magenta, and we'll put some of that, because I don't know if you're here last week and you saw that I couldn't get close to the pink that I was seeing without doing 2 different colors. And here's the chip that I was working from. And those are from the actual flowers. I actually have some flowers here that I grabbed. We're right at the end of them, so they're not showing the same color quite as they were when they were fresher. So this was the color that I had decided that pale pink, the pinky purple part was. And there. But when it's printed off, it prints off differently. So I have to kind of remember that. A little bit more neutral tint in to bring that chroma down. Okay, and test it to see if that's where I want it to be. And I'm looking at it. And I'm coming in, and I'm going to come in here. That's a lot of paint. Look at the value difference of that. I'm going to come down, and I'm going to move that paint around. Nice and carefully. Keeping the edge of the petal in front nice and tidy. Okay, and then I see that there's a darker blue area here too. So take my 2 blues, bring in some of the neutral tint, a little bit of the orange. Oh, I still want a little bit more blue in there. I want more chroma in it. After all, we are doing flowers. It might be too much chroma, but there we go. We can. Now, if I feel like I have too much paint in there, I'm just going to come with my brush and move the paint around so that I'm not rushing to try to get to that value 4. I'm just trying to get, I'm going to need a bigger brush. So let's get a bigger brush so I can do this area here. It's more of a purple. So I'm going to lay some of the purple in there just as we go, and then I'm going to go more towards the quin magenta and lay it as I go along here so that it stays kind of separate from the actual purple. And then I want some of that darker blue to come in and be part of this whole thing too. Careful not to blend too much. I'm not even touching the blue to the purple yet, partially because I've got too much paint there. So I'm just going to come in and put the blue in place. Now I've gone over into the green and I don't want that, so I'm just going to pull it back and take my cloth and very quickly pull it back without pulling any of the green. Dry my brush and then come and blend this together here. Nice and carefully, because I still want that blue to stand out as being part of this area. Oh, I still have some paint leaching into the green. Okay, let's straighten this out, pull it, push it down to pull out all of that moisture. I've pulled a little bit of the green off. I'm not worried about it. That's fixable. Just have to let it dry so that you have time to fix it. So when I come here, I can see that that's dark, and it's dark as it starts in here, and then it lightens as it moves away. So I'm not going to put a ton of paint in here. I'm just going to lighten it as it comes away. And I think what I'm going to do is bring in some of that cobalt blue just at that edge, just to pull in. Again, if I want to darken it later, I'm still able to do that, because I'm working a little bit at a little bit at a little bit. Okay. I was a little late starting, so I don't know how long I'm into this. Does it tell me anywhere? Nope. Okay, well, we'll do a little bit more, and then I will shut this down. So that's getting darker. That's still probably not as dark as I need it to be yet, but it's working its way there. And if all these edges are not perfect, I don't worry about that, because I will come and fix them up right at the end. After it's dried for 4 or 5 days, I come with a tiny brush and I touch all those edges to perfection. I've not been able to ever paint perfectly in my life, and I'm not worried about it. Okay. So here is some cobalt blue here. And then some Quin Magenta, very light, so I'm a lot of water in this here to just darken this. Keep that blue there. A lot of water to keep it pale. Much easier to deal with pale than to overdo it. Okay. Oh, there, that's a better. Now it'll dry darker, lighter, and we'll see how I feel about that. I think that's a good place to stop today. So we've done a little bit of adding texture in that will go underneath, and I will work on more. We've got some of the darker points in, but this needs now to be darker. We darken this one up, and I've added value here and a darker value here. And we use this nifty little process to figure out if my values are close. Most people like their watercolor to be very pale and watercolor-like. I like mine to be rich and deep and intense. So let's go on over here. Well, thank you for joining me today as I continue to work on this painting. I'm hoping by next week, I'm pretty sure by next week, this one will be done, and I will be back to working on birds. So thank you for joining me. Subscribe, like, follow me on my website, and I will see you next week. Take care. Bye.